All right, next up, with the theme of yin and yang, the large platforms, we started with Neil and Google. Facebook very much wanted to sit down and have a conversation with me. They just couldn't wait, I swear. But the fact is they're in something called the quiet period, which is to say that they have to be quiet because they're in a filing for an IPO. So unfortunately, Facebook isn't here, but another very large platform is. And Neil's counterpart at Microsoft is now going to sit down and have a conversation with me. And that would be Rick van der Kooi, who runs the advertising stack for Microsoft Advertising Solutions. Please join me in welcoming Rick to the Signal stage.
It's time to get away.
Very good to see you. Right here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate
I'm happy to. So Microsoft. Microsoft has been around a long time. And I think when MSN was built and Microsoft realized it was in the media and advertising business, it took a while for you to sort of become what you are now. But I'd like to start with a question about how you, and forgive the entendre, but how do you stack up against someone like Google, which has built this incredible vertical sort of integrated stack of every possible advertising service? And do you have a philosophy that's different from Google that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And I'll try to contrast a little bit, but let me say up front, with all the respect for what Google has done and is doing. We do have a different philosophy in that ours is trying to form a best-of-breed stack with other industry players, where we provide some of the components, some of the platform components, some of the point solutions, some of the creative capabilities, but at the same time leverage what's out there to be able to fulfill, you could say, the needs of marketers and advertisers around the world. And so rather than looking for we want to own the stack, we want to integrate the whole stack, and with, of course, the advantages that approach brings, we more believe in if you help the industry continue to be successful by allowing more blooms to flourish or to flower, then ultimately that's going to be better for the industry as a whole.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by partnering as opposed to, say, acquiring and integrating? Because embrace and extend used to be the tagline unofficially for Microsoft.
And it is still, I would say, the approach that we take still aligns sort of quite clearly with that. But there are lots of media capabilities that we have that we partner with others on. On mobile-rich media, we partner with Motion. On certain search capabilities, we partner with AdChemy. And some of those we have a small stake in. That's mostly, I will sort of describe as a defensive approach rather than an offensive approach. Mm-hmm. But the idea is more that we want to leverage the capabilities in those partnerships versus, again, buying them outright and using our capital to integrate them.
Companies like Facebook or Google, if you just look at their revenue streams, you could see that 95+% of them come from people like the folks in this room. They're driven entirely by marketing dollars. Now, when you look at the revenue streams of Microsoft, that's not true. It's almost the reverse in terms of you have a very large, P&L that you're responsible for, but relative to Office and Windows, it's pretty small. Does Steve Ballmer wake up in the morning saying, "I've got to grow my ad business"?
It's a great question. And I assume that many people would have seen the Steve Ballmer on stage where he sort of bounces around and goes developer, developer, developer.
Yeah.
There is one of those same clips that is advertiser, 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 advertiser. I would say actions.
You need to release that, and he has to have huge sweat circles.
Yeah, no, those are par for the course. I would say actions speak louder than words. And if you sort of look at what we have done over the years, the investments that we've made in ad technology, for those of you that follow our financials, you can see that on a quarter after quarter basis, we're still investing, and we're investing deeply into search. The acquisition of Skype is an example of how do you bring together a user asset with again, a property that is very attractive to marketers and advertisers, and that adds something that really we didn't have before. And what people will see, hopefully before too long, with what we're doing around Windows 8, I think show that we're very, very serious about advertising. And at the end of the day, it's not so much what Steve wakes up with, it's more what I wake up with and what the rest of the online services team wake up with. And our goal is firmly to grow our user base and to grow our advertising business on the back of that.
So let me go down this dark alley a bit. Windows 8, advertising, help. What do you mean?
Yeah, and we're also a little bit in a quiet period. Paint me a picture of how
you're also in a quiet period.
But I'll tell you.
At least you're here. But like, paint me a scenario, not a forward-looking statement, but just between us chickens, of how Windows 8 integrates with an advertising opportunity for these folks.
Yeah, and the sort of clearest way is Windows 8 is going to have an app store on it, both on whether it's a Slate device or a pad device, or it's a laptop. And our annual run rate is somewhere between 200 and 300 million units. And given the scale that we have with those devices, if we have an app store on it, it will be of scale that is going to be attractive to advertisers also. And so we're going to be bringing out our own apps that sit on top of that. And we're, of course, inviting many app developers to write to our technology. And that's going to provide high-quality ad environments for people to take advantage of. Our focus is going to be on high quality and more, you could say, focus on depth rather than breadth maybe to start off with. But ultimately, again, given the scale and given the numbers of advertisers that are trying to reach their audience, it should be a very attractive vehicle for it.
Interesting. Now, speaking of connection or deep connection with a customer or a user or an audience member, social has been a proxy in a way for that, and it's clear that with Google+, as we discussed with Neil earlier this morning, that Google's hell-bent on getting a deeper connection with the previously ephemeral search user. Facebook already has a lot of information about all of us if we are users of Facebook. What kind of a connection do you have with that customer, and are you working to deepen it? And perhaps the other part of the question is, why doesn't Microsoft play in social the way that Google is with Google+ and Facebook obviously is a native play?
Yeah, I might make a snarky remark and say I'd rather play like Facebook than maybe others. But if you think more broadly, about social, I think about it in two dimensions. One is sort of the social user asset, where indeed, Facebook, of course, has a phenomenal asset. Twitter has a great asset. Pinterest is turning into something that, is a different form of social. But in my mind, it sort of more illustrates that social is still very much in its infancy, even on the user side. But Facebook is a juggernaut in this. And once you have a juggernaut like that, then the idea of copying them and running after that doesn't sound like a very attractive proposition from my perspective. When I think about it from an advertiser perspective, I think the industry is even more in its infancy. And social advertising is not limited to, you could say, social surface areas per se. That is about how do you create dialogue with users, with audience, how do you create connections that are deeper. And there are many surface areas that you can use for that. How can you turn users into people who recommend your product? And so we launched at Social Media Week a couple of weeks ago, we launched our sort of, social advertising play that we call People-Powered Stories. And rather than sort of discussing the merits of, is that the right way to go about it or not, it is saying, okay, there are different ways of engaging people in the social dynamic. And having them recommend products. And all people who are marketers in this room, want people to recommend their products. And if you can bring that out in advertising, irrespective of the surface area, it doesn't need to be on a social environment. Now, having said all that, of course, we do want to engage with users in a social setting as well. We're thinking about how Skype can help achieve some of those things. And certainly the partnership that we have with Facebook around search is a very interesting one. And in May, we'll be sort of, bringing out the next instantiation of that partnership. And I think in a way that people will find very exciting.
Well, you'll have to announce that at the CM Summit then.
Yes. That is the quiet period, but I'll say in May.
When is it not quiet period in this industry?
No, I'm probably disclosing more than I should. But
So, people-powered stories sounds a lot like content marketing, sounds a lot like conversational marketing, and that sounds a lot like what Facebook announced 2 weeks ago in terms of the way the timeline has changed, right? So
Yes.
this idea of stories being, this is now the meme of this conference, the atomic unit of marketing. I'm wondering, though, in order to do all of that, you need data. To attach the right message at the right time to the right place in the right context, and then to notice whether or not the signal back is good or bad, and then to amplify or pull back. In other words, that ability to actually have a conversation in real time requires a lot of data. About a year or so ago at the IAB, you gave a keynote and then wrote a blog post about don't ask, don't tell. And you criticized our industry for collecting a lot of data and hoping no one notices, essentially.
That's right.
Can you kind of give us a bit more, unpack that sentiment and tell me where you think we've gone as an industry in the last year with regards to data policy?
Yeah. And I still think we're, to a significant extent, in the same place, but it is an accident waiting to happen, I think, in many ways. Data has sort of become the holy grail of, how do I find my audience and how do I engage my audience? And it's become sort of the proxy of understanding people and understanding their needs. And while I think that is important, I do think also we're getting very eager to all jump on this data bandwagon. And in my mind, we shouldn't lose the forest for the trees around. It is ultimately about engaging a consumer and being able to reach them with a message, and then hopefully, creating dialogue. But then, sort of more specifically to your question, I do think the future will be, defined by users deciding who they share their information with, how they share it, what kind of data they're willing to share, maybe what the quid pro quo is. Mm-hmm. And I still feel that as an industry, we're trying to sort of block that as much as we can. We're trying to sort of leverage the data that we pick up from the signals that, of course, big technology stacks enable you to do. But at the end of the day, to make that really valuable in my mind is actually engaging the user and engaging them with the data that you already have, and then really make it valuable. And if we are more ultimately transparent about it, I do think that there is more economic value that we can generate as an industry. The kind of scrutiny, the kind of pressure that we're getting, if you think about, regions such as Europe where, there's very, let me describe it, unattractive legislation that may be coming in the next 6 to 12 months. And us sitting here and trying to just siphon off that data in the most effective way, I just don't think is a recipe for future success.
How do you change that, though? I mean, you're a participant, as is FM and a lot of others in RTB exchanges. You work with AppNexus, for example.
Yep.
And that's very, very data-driven. Is there some practice that we should change? Is there some practical advice that you could give us that would help us not have this accident that might be waiting to happen?
You know, I don't want to call it advice because it's not as if I'm lecturing anybody. We also have a business that is built around data. But I do think the future is in being very transparent about the data that we collect, allowing users to opt out very, very easily out of that data usage, and then inviting them through the engagement that our properties ultimately bring, the engagement that ads need to bring, the engagement that the social interaction needs to bring, using that as an open invitation and a transparent invitation to then, you know, augment it in a transparent way and in a way that the user says, you know, I see value out of that.
Right, yeah.
And that's where we are going with our, let's say, our strategies and the things that we are building. And there's lots of, you know, smaller startups that are focusing on how you know, we make the industry more transparent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, now, when we spoke, you had a couple of interesting points that I wanted to throw out there and let you expand on. We don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to see if we could get you. You had interesting thoughts about the agency. We have a lot of agency people here. And by the way, there's 3,000 people who have watched so far online. So.
Careful what I say.
All of them regulators from Europe. What is your view of the role of the agency and whether the agency is in any way threatened in its current model?
Obviously a loaded question, and I'll jump straight into it. You know, in my mind, it's very interesting if you look at where we as an industry have focused and where the agencies have focused over the last, let me say, 5 years. And a lot of that focus has been about, you know, how do we enable data, technology, and sort of jumping into that side, rather than saying, how do we turn the web into an environment where creative messaging really delivers? Yeah, many marketers out there would say, well, I'm not putting more dollars into that environment because I'm not sure that it delivers as well. And I think the first role of the agencies, particularly the creative agencies, is to ensure that the creative medium delivers to reach audience. And so in my mind, the fact that many agencies, or maybe the industry, hasn't made enough progress there, I think is a role that the agencies should take upon themselves. And then you can argue over whether or not all that focus on technology and, you know, trading platforms and DSP-like capabilities and all of that, whether that ultimately really is areas of strength. I mean, it's a crowded space. And there are a lot of people that really do that for a living. And I'm not referring to, you know, Microsoft or anything. I'm referring to just many point players that, you know, the whole valley is littered with, that really do that for a living and that I think can do that very, very well. Right. And so I think there is sort of still a big opportunity out there to turn that into, you know, how do we make the creative medium really work?
And you also have, and please, anyone with a question, raise your hand so we can. Okay, great. Get a mic to you because you'll be next, right over here. Microsoft has made part of its sort of name in what might be, you know, called enterprise IT.
Yeah.
Marketing, as when I opened, you know, the number of people in the room that work directly now with technologists. It was something like 80% of hands went up. You have this concept of the Chief Information Management Officer, Marketing Officer rather, I think you called it.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think it was a Forrester report that came out last week which said the CMO is going to spend more on IT than the CIO in 2015 or 2017 or something like that. And I think that again goes really directly back to this data question about how do you connect the data that you have on your premises, about your audience, about the industry as a whole, and connect it to what you're seeing on the web. And I do think they are going to become, best friends soon if they aren't already.
The CIO and the CMO.
CIO and the CMO.
Oh, I know they already hang out and drink together.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the same up in Redmond where we are. But ultimately, we actually grew up as a consumer player. We turned into an enterprise player. And in doing so, we maybe, forgot some of our roots on the consumer side. And we have been digging hard over the last few years to really, uncover those again. And I think with things like, Connect and some of the services that are coming out, we're refining those. But ultimately, indeed, I think as an industry, making sure that we create those connections very effectively without the CMO truly becoming a CIO, but deeply understanding what technology and data can do for you. And I would say particularly the CIO understanding what the marketer can achieve. We sort of think of it as making the CIO the hero within their environments. In general, I guess CIOs aren't seen as the heroes in their work environments, and that's how we tend to think about it.
Great. We have a question right back here.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Josh Crandall from NetPop Research. After launching Bing, which is a really great product.
Thank you.
And spending $100 million reported on advertising to gain 15% of the market share, what would you say is the sense of success around that launch for Microsoft, and what's next? Thanks.
If we had only spent $100 million to gain 15%, that would have been the best investment that any of us could have ever done. But the idea is, if you think about where we are with Bing, on the one side we feel great about, now we are 30% player in the US, also by virtue of course, the partnership with Yahoo. But even if you took that out and you look at our organic growth, we were 7% 2 years ago, we're now 15%. We feel tremendous about the progress that we have made there. Chipping away, it's sort of month by month, hand-to-hand combat to try and grow share. And so the fact that we've been able to do that, we feel great about. But at the same time, we're up against a formidable competitor. And there is a lot for us to do. We can't take our eye off the ball 1 second, and we're not resting on our laurels or patting ourselves on the back for what we've achieved. This market doesn't stand still. If we don't continue to track up, then the risk of decline is around the corner. And so we're super focused on continuing to innovate with the user experience. I was sort of alluding to that in what we're thinking of for the May release. We're going to come with some really new things again that hopefully people will like as well. The things that we've done around visual and social so far have caught on very well. People sort of, the recollection and the usage of people has been very favorable. But we're going to continue to stay on that path. And then when it comes to sort of core relevance of the product, we measure ourselves first of all on the basics. How relevant are our search results versus the competition? And there we stack up very well, and you can all go to third-party research rather than me sort of, blowing our own trumpet there. But we will stay on that path of making sure that our search results are, the best bar none.
And I should note, as a student of your financials, you get beat up a lot, not personally, that was a royal you.
That's my Steve.
For losing money. The money-losing online services. But as I understand it, you roll the investment into Bing into your online services business. Were it not in that investment, would your advertising business be profitable?
A smile says more than 1,000 words.
The answer to that question is most likely yes. Do we have a question here? Oh, no, you're telling me we can't take any more questions because I'm letting this go over. Right. Oh, the flashing red light that I'm ignoring, yes. Please join me in thanking Rick for coming.
Thank you all. Thanks, John.